My name is Taylor Owen. I now work at the Columbia Journalism School, but I want to talk about a project that was part of my PhD thesis, a historical mapping project on the bombing of Cambodia. I want to start in the White House with a conversation between Kissinger and Nixon. Nixon, I want everything that can fly to go out there and crack the hell out of them. There's no limitation on mileage, and there's no limitation on budget. Is that clear? Kissinger responded, "The problem is, Mr. President, the Air Force is designed for an air battle against the Soviet Union. They're not designed for this war. In fact, they're not designed for any war we're likely to have to fight." Despite this prescience, 15 minutes later, Kissinger called the general in charge of the Air Force in Indochina. He, Nixon, wants a massive bombing campaign inside Cambodia. He doesn't want to hear anything. It's an order. It's to be done. Anything that flies on anything that moves. You got that? Haig's response is barely audible in the transcript, but it sounds like laughing. This is the result of that conversation. Over 200,000 sorties in Cambodia over an 8-year period, which makes it one of the most bombed countries in history. What's remarkable is that there's the history of this data. It was originally one of the first databases ever built by IBM on punch cards. It was then stored and classified until Clinton released it to the Vietnamese demining groups to help them find unexploded ordnances. The data is really quite remarkable. It's 115,000 records detailing the types of planes, the types of bombs, the tonnage of bombs, the dates, the times, and most importantly, the coordinates. With the coordinates, we can do a whole series of historical mapping with the data. Now, when I first saw this, and I was given this by the demining organizations, I didn't know what it meant. So with the Cambodian genocide historian, Ben Kiernan, we did a host of exploration about the costs and consequences and historical implications of this bombing. One of the first things we did was turn the data into a timeline. So here we could see the daily bombings, and we could fact-check the historical narrative. We could see that the bombings started 4 years earlier than they were ever thought to. We could see that the Paris Peace Agreement ceasefire wasn't put into action. We can also map various campaigns. This map is of the Menu campaign, the secret bombing campaign that Nixon would have been impeached for had it not been for Watergate. These are the base areas they attacked. What we can see, though, in the bottom right map is if you map the bombings during that time period, it was actually far more extensive. In the top left, even more egregious, are 3 base areas that Kissinger claims they didn't bomb because of high civilian populations. We can also explore this really contentious relationship between the bombing and the rise of the Khmer Rouge. The correlation is compelling. The Khmer Rouge were a force of 5,000 people when the heaviest part of the bombing began. 3 years later, they were a force of 200,000 capable of taking over a US-backed government. One of the arguments for how this happened is that the US bombing, seen here going east to west over time, pushed the more radical Viet Cong into contact with the Khmer Rouge. What this resulted in was the Khmer Rouge shifting from being a Maoist agrarian revolution to, like the Viet Cong, being an anti-imperial revolution. By mapping, or by correlating the interviews with survivors of the bombing, we can show this dynamic at work. We can see how the Khmer Rouge moved into villages right after the bombing and used a radicalized citizenry to join the revolution against the government and against the bombings. I think there's real implications here for how we think of counterinsurgency now. Perhaps most interesting, it doesn't take much to radicalize a population. This quote at the top says that 70 people joined the revolution after just one bombing incident. We'd be remiss not to talk about Henry Kissinger for a second. He was central to this entire campaign. We went through and fact-checked all the things he said about it, and we can find lots of errors. One in particular, though, is that he claims over and over again that what he calls the Kissinger second rule of engagement, which is they'll never bomb within 1 kilometer of a village in Cambodia. This image on the left is 12 villages. On the right is the bombing it sustained throughout the campaign. Even more grotesquely, this is an area to the southeast of Phnom Penh, a heavily populated area. The rings in this photo are the areas under the B-52 bombing areas. I want to end just with a couple points about crisis mapping. We tend to talk about crisis mapping as being big, live, real-time data. But data really does have a historical arc. This is particularly the case for government data that is often deleted, and if it's not, it's classified for a very long period of time. We need to focus on this data when it does get released so that we can understand its historical implications. Thanks.